Happy birthday. Yeah, as a recovering perfectionist, I appreciated that prayer. And then the flip side of perfectionism, its evil twin, procrastination. I don't know if that's something that you have to fight, but I have to fight it. And my mother will tell you, I get it from her, both of those. They're flip sides of the same awful coin, procrastination and perfectionism. And so I want to not do that. Having said that, we're going to launch into a study of do word studies, and what do? I go off my little perfectionist tendencies, okay? So what I want to do today is introduce some thoughts about words and word studies, which is kind of the direction that we kind of took when I floated the idea, what do we want to do for a summer study? And Naoma suggested some words. A couple of others of you suggested some suggestions for words, and we're going to do that. And I thought maybe today we can kind of get the ball rolling with that. My goal is, if I wanted to do word studies, how would I go about doing that? And what are some things to think about if I wanted to do that? So I have in mind the average person who's interested and motivated and eager and who has their English Bible with them, maybe a couple of other, and I'll show you a few things here, maybe a few other tools. How could they do that? Okay, so it's not necessarily going to be a step-by-step how-to, maybe just some things to be aware of. Okay, so I think I mentioned this every week for the last 2 or 3, but as we're thinking about this, my strong suit, I'm not saying I'm strong, maybe I should say I feel strongest, I feel most comfortable, even if it's something like Micah, which I haven't studied in a long time, to just start at the beginning and go all the way through, to do an exegetical study where the point is to draw out what the text says and to then think about what would this mean for us. That's where I feel strongest. I feel most comfortable, whether it's Mark or Exodus or Micah or Revelation. I'm game for anything and have taught all of it at some point. That's where I feel most comfortable. So even if I'm going to do a topical study or do a word study, the gravitational pull of that approach is going to pull me back into kind of that mode of thinking. So keep that in mind as I suggest a few things today. But I have long been fascinated by doing word studies. And it, in many ways, I think, I've always loved vocabulary. I was the kid in class that loved the spelling words because you had to learn all the words. I loved that. In high school, my Latin teacher, we did 400 some odd English vocabulary words that had Latin backgrounds. And we did, every Tuesday and Thursday, we did vocabulary words. And it was just fabulous, and I loved it. Then, Rodney Cloud, who taught Hebrew at Lipscomb forever, and he's retired, but he's now dean at Amridge. He's still teaching, 90-something years old. Not slowing down a bit. He offered on Sunday afternoons for whoever's interested, let's do Greek and Hebrew for whoever's interested at Hendersonville Church. And of course, I was, I think, a junior in high school. I said, I'll be there. And so there I was. There were about 8 of us, I think, maybe 10. And it was Sunday afternoons. I don't remember how long it lasted, but it was, here's the alphabet. Here's how the letters look. Here's a few vocabulary words, and we started with the real easy ones, words that come directly out of Hebrew, kind of almost instantly translated or transferred into English. Hallelujah is one. In Greek, baptism is a good example, where we just give the English equivalent of the Greek letters and coin a new word. And that was a little way to dip our toe in. I don't remember much at all in terms of grammar or anything like that. It wasn't a kind of a language study, but it was more of it was almost how to make use of a little bit of this language to enrich your Bible study. That was a great way to frame it. It's not for everyone. If you want to be adventurous and dig deep, that was just right up your alley. And that was me, and I loved it. So if you're adventurous and you want to dig deep and you're an English reader, how do you do word studies? Well, maybe some of this will be helpful. I also will try to remember rule number 1. Rule number 1. So for the sake of this study, rule number 1, and I may flash this, is I will not be intimidated by an opportunity to learn. Rule number 1, because, and I think this is really important, to explicitly say, anytime we're throwing around Greek or Hebrew out loud in a Sunday school class for folks who are neither Greek nor Hebrew, Rodney also said, I took him for Hebrew my senior year. I should say my first college course ever was a Greek class. And the reason it was the first one was because my Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes didn't meet the first Monday, because that was the first Monday of the semester was always kind of a find your class, get your books, get settled day. And classes always started on Tuesday. And I didn't have an 8 o'clock class on Tuesday. I had Greek at 10 every day. So my first college class was Greek. So intimidating. Freshman year, boy, I think I'd do it again. But I may want to wait and do it my senior year. I took Hebrew my senior year, and Rodney says, you can do this. Every little 4-year-old Hebrew boy and girl does this. You can do this. You can learn these words. You can learn how to write these letters. You know how to do the alphabet. They can do it. You can do it. And we thought, well, I guess you're right. I guess I can. And then I think he called us his kindergartners or something like that, because it was a way to help give us confidence that we too could do this. So anytime you're throwing out Greek or Hebrew in a room full of people who are neither Greek nor Hebrew, I think it's well worth saying this should not put you off. Because I think we've all listened to sermons where someone goes off on a Greek or Hebrew tangent, and we then have to feel like, well, I hope you're right. How would I ever verify that? I don't know that. And the more extreme forms of that is when someone starts pulling out Greek and Hebrew and kind of putting those cards on the table as if to just shut things down, and next thing you know, it looks like a display of what I know is better than what you know. I'm so grateful. My years at Central Church, when I was associate minister there, the preaching minister was also my exegesis teacher at Lipscomb. And he was very concerned that we not do that in front of our classes. So he told us, so these are Bible majors intending to go into some type of ministry. He says, you need to aim your classes at a college-educated class. He says, this is the 1990s. Most people in most churches are either going to have been to college or they're sending their kids to college. They are probably very engaged professionals in a field of expertise that you know nothing about, and you need to honor their intelligence and their capabilities, and do not condescend. You need to speak as one who's competent to people who are competent, and you don't ever talk down to people. And even if they haven't been to college, that's not an excuse for them to feel like somehow they're on the outs because you're the expert, blathering on, dropping Greek and Hebrew on their heads. It was so helpful for him to say that out loud. I've never forgotten it, and I feel like that ought to be said out loud. So rule number one is we'll not be intimidated by things that are an opportunity for us to learn, because we all have opportunities to learn, especially the guy wearing my shoes right now. I don't claim expertise. I just have been given a little bit of tools to help figure out my way forward. And I think maybe that's all of us. We just have the tools available to us, and we're going to do the best we can. I think that's worth saying out loud up front. Just because we may not be Greek or Hebrew, and I am neither Greek nor Hebrew, doesn't mean that with us, with our English versions, we're somehow left at a disadvantage. There's richness in these languages that we miss because we are not native speakers of that language, just like there's a richness to English that people who speak German and only German would not catch. We have idioms, we have word plays, we have the quirks of the language that just come with the language. That's true in Greek, that's true in Hebrew, it's true in English, it's true in any language. And so part of the challenge of translation is to identify those peculiarities and carry them over in some way into the receptor language. So the first tool that I would suggest, if you're going to do word studies, is some standard version, and I suspect all of you have one. By standard, I mean a major committee translation. Like, what do I mean by a committee? All right, if you were to look at the preface to your translation, which you probably may never have read, you mean there's a preface to the translation? Yes. Most of I would say probably all the versions that we're going to have in this room are done by a large committee of translators. Translators with expertise in their respective areas. In other words, a John Lewis with expertise in Isaiah or Micah doing translation work as part of a team in doing a new version. He's working on translating parts of Isaiah or Micah. That's who you want. You don't want this guy translating Micah. You want someone with expertise. NIV is a committee translation. New American Standard, which I'm going to show you here. This is our Pew Bible at Central Church. This is the one I taught out of for years. This is New American Standard updated version, updated in 1995, which is now 30 years old. This is an update of the New American Standard of the 1960s. I fell in love with this one because this is in the pew back in front of you at Central Church, and we all would come in and we just got to where most of us would just use the one in front of us and then leave it in the pew in front of us and move on. So this is what I used. If folks were coming in off the street, and we had a lot coming in off the street, they were not bringing a Bible with them, we had a Bible in front of them, they could pick it up and read it, and I said, well, I'm just going to teach out of this because if for no other reason, it's the one in front of you. And that's doing the same thing now. So this Christian Standard version, Holman Christian Standard Bible, you look in the front, they've got a committee, the committee of experts. So in other words, it's not done by one person, it's not done by two people, it's not done by a team of three, it's done by a team of multiple people. And they're going to explain their rationale and how they have approached the translation process. I hope that this will make sense in just a few minutes when I make some more suggestions, because the way that you translate can have some impact downstream of your doing things like word studies. Okay? There are some committee translations which lean a little more literal in terms of rendering the same Greek or Hebrew term more or less the same way every time it occurs, consistency, and word structure in sentences. And there are some that are a bit freer, and they're not aiming at a kind of a word-for-word equivalency, but they'll think in thoughts or phrases, perhaps. NIV would be kind of on that end of a spectrum. The New American Standard would be over here on a more literal word-for-word end of the spectrum. We're going to make sure she's going the right way. There you go. Thank you. So an English version is the first place to start to just remember how it goes about translating. This will be important in just a minute. I'd recommend 2 or 3 good English versions. I always have this one handy. So as I'm teaching through Micah or Exodus or Mark or whatever it is we're doing, this is the one I'm standing up here with and have written. I've also used this a lot. I've got an NIV handy. I've got my New Revised Standard Version handy. I'll read in various English versions. Okay. Now, if you have a concordance at home, that's another great tool. Let me hand out there should be 5 there. There should be 2 there. There's 1. Here's 1. I can walk around with this microphone. I would occasionally walk around in class when I taught and the kids didn't know what to do. They all got nervous. I said, yeah, walk around, keep you all on your toes. Yes? Good morning. Yes, we'll give one for Virginia. There we go. Yeah, this is small print. I apologize. Yeah, we'll have to do what we need to do, okay? I like my bifocals. Yeah, it makes it easy. So on one side, you've got Slayer to Sleep, page 899, and then on the other, you've got the title page. Concordances vary. If you've got a study Bible, you may have a little miniature concordance at the back of the study Bible, which is great, so far as it goes, and the more exhaustive it is, the better. This is an older one. I think we might have this in the church library. I like this one because it's really helpful. In fact, if you just look at the title, Analytical Concordance, that right there tells us something, and I'll show. I've got the page to illustrate. It's got all these references, okay, subdivided under the Greek and Hebrew and Greek originals. Okay, that's going to be important in just a second, with the literal meaning and pronunciation of each. That's going to be really helpful. I'll offer a caution, but that's going to be really helpful. I love this. Designed for the simplest reader of the English Bible. Again, the rule number 1, okay? This is to help us, not to intimidate us, So you first look at Young's Analytical Concordance and you're like, whoa, that's intimidating. Okay, Mr. Young says, I'm not trying to intimidate you, I'm trying to help you. Even the simplest readers of the English Bible can benefit from this. Okay, now what he does, and I want to use the word sleep as an example. Well, you'll have to look at the middle of the bottom half of the middle column is where sleep first shows up, and then it continues on the right-hand column. Okay? The way that he arranges this is by the Hebrew and Greek terms, and you can see at a glance that there are a few Hebrew and Greek terms that come into English as sleep. So the way that this is arranged is by the English term, sleep. Did you know there was a variety of Greek or Hebrew terms under those English occurrences of the word sleep? I didn't know that. That's what Young's Analytical Concordance will tell you, is there's a variety of terms. Now you say, I don't know Greek or Hebrew. Like, okay, neither do I. That's not necessarily a hurdle, rule number one, okay, just to see that there's variety going on there. For example, if you look on the right-hand column, see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 groupings. Okay, 6 of them are Hebrew terms. 1 of them is a Greek term. Okay, actually, if we were to turn the page, we could go on. Okay, do you see number 6? To lie down, and then it says shakab. See that one? Just glancing at that, boy, that term occurs, and almost every time it is, and he slept with his fathers. And you can really see that very clearly. He slept with his fathers, he slept with his fathers, he slept with his fathers, over and over and over and over and over again. I suspect if we really looked closely at maybe some of the others, maybe another term gets translated that way. But boy, this one term, it may be there's a nuance of meaning or a nuance of usage which we may say he was buried, which in Hebrew, very vivid language in terms of expressing kind of concrete actions. In one language you could say, oh, they were buried. In Hebrew you'd say something like, they slept with their fathers. Okay, you see there's right there some shade of usage comes out. I wouldn't know that if I just worked from a strict English-only concordance. Okay. Now, Robert Young's concordance is probably a bit outdated in some ways. Probably some of the ways he translates some words probably could be finessed and improved. I hardly would know how to evaluate that because, again, like I told you, I'm just a smatterer in this myself. But it's not without value, and I really, really like it because it's exhaustive. It's also going to work off the King James Version, I believe, as far as I could tell. Okay? Which is not a bad translation for its time. Okay? But the beauty of a tool like this, even if it's keyed to the King James Version, is probably, I bet all of us have a King James Version at home. And we can easily go from King James to New American Standard or Christian Standard or whatever it is we have. We've got 2 English versions open at the same time and our concordance. We could spend a little time. Again, this whole approach is designed for the motivated, eager student who wants to dig a little deeper in their own Bible study. So someone who has a bit of time to devote to this and a inclination to dig deep, a tool like Robert Young's Concordance could help you as you're looking through various words and terms. Okay. Let's then look at, and the time is the time going to get away from us? Not too bad, not too bad at all. Okay. There's another handout here. This one should be two-sided also. And as I was working through and preparing, I ran across this and thought, well, I can work up a handout on that. That would be helpful. And I hope it is. So I got two sides. Why don't we look at the side that's got the circles on it? So I adapted this. Think of, well, I also ran across this analogy. We make supper from ingredients, okay? And there's a kind of an interplay of flavor between the ingredients and the final dish. And it's not enough to just eat all the ingredients one at a time. It's the combination that matters. However, take an ingredient out and you don't have quite the same combination. Or switch an ingredient. We probably all have grabbed the salt when we thought it was sugar, or the sugar and salt, or done one of those. Doesn't turn out the same way, okay? The ingredients matter. The flavor of the ingredient can make or break a dish, okay? The meaning of a word is really important. And words have meaning, and they're not just totally interchangeable, as if one doesn't make any difference to use another one, okay? However, words exist within units of thought, a sentence or a phrase or a paragraph, kind of like ingredients in your meatloaf, okay? You don't have a meatloaf if you don't have meat or breadcrumbs or whatever it is you put in it, okay? You can start substituting out ingredients and no longer have the thing, okay? So words exist within a sentence or a paragraph, which exist within a book. So as you're thinking and doing about word studies, you'll want to look at where does this word show up? For example, you want to let's trace the usage of the word faith in the book of, and insert book here, okay? Well, you may also, or the word parable, like let's look at the parables. Maybe we could go a step beyond just the book and look at the same author, but something else that author has written. For example, we want to look at faith in Paul's letter to Galatia. Well, we may also look at what does Paul say about faith? Where does that show up elsewhere in other letters from Paul? Okay? Or a healing miracle that happens in other Gospels. So see that larger circle, the same author, but a different book. Sorry, I'm working off a handout. How you doing?
Thank you, Brian.
Very good. Good to see you. So we've got kind of concentric circles, and the beauty of doing word studies will grow as we see these usages elsewhere. So again, you're motivated and you're reading and you're studying, so the word itself will have meaning, okay, will have significance. look at how it's used. Look at where it shows up. Look at how this term in this author works. Like, every time Paul says this term, interesting. We kind of trace the theme through the book. Okay, now, see the bottom? My little laundry list? Remember rule number 1. Okay, this is what the folks who are doing scholarship for the sake of the church try to pay attention to. Okay, I'm not equipped to do some of this. You're not equipped to do this. That's okay. I don't know. Maybe you woke up this morning and thought, boy, I need to brush up on Semitic parallels to the Old Testament. I really need to do that. I've been putting that off for so long. I really could learn Ugaritic and Phoenician and Aramaic, and really, why shouldn't we? Okay, I realize we're not going to do that, but that's what the specialists do who put together our English translations. That's what they're doing as they're looking at these terms. They're looking at not just the rest of the book, but the remainder of the Old or New Testament. They're looking at the equivalency from one testament to the other. They're looking at things like other literature from the period, non-biblical contemporary writings, that is, other things in Greek from the first century. If we're looking at Greek, then they may want to look at the Greek translation of the Old Testament. Did you know the Old Testament was translated before the time of Jesus into Greek, from Hebrew to Greek? So Jesus has access, Paul has access to the Old Testament in Greek. Well, the New Testament's written in Greek. Is there anything in the Old Testament in Greek that would have something to say to Greek speakers of the first century? Yeah, of course. Okay, folks are going to look and kind of sniff down those alleys and look at those leads. What about the foreground, not the background, but what about on the other side? We would think, look at the background, look at the background, look at the back. Well, what about how early Christian writers on this side were using terms? That's something that they're going to do. Again, I know we didn't wake up this morning thinking, I need to read more of the early Christian fathers in Greek. Okay, I know you didn't say that, but there's folks that do that. And then the translation history. Our English versions, because English comes out of Latin, are part of a long history of translation. So again, there's my high school Latin coming in. Maybe you took Latin in high school. Maybe you can read Spanish. Maybe there's other variations of the Romantic languages, and English is just one of them that you could then, I don't know, do you know French? Look at the French version and see how it translates something. Okay. Now, the backside. This is the first part of 1 Thessalonians 5. Now, what this shows us is Paul uses two terms, and there's a bit of a play here. I know we don't read the Greek, but I put it there so you can see what it looks like. Two terms. Kathudomen, bless you, gesundheit, okay? And Gregoromen, our name Gregory. Greg comes from this, okay? The literal translation of one is to be asleep, and the literal translation of the other is to be awake. In other words, if you were to see this little term running by and you reached, grabbed him and held him up and says, what do you mean? His little feet are running. He's like, to be asleep, to be awake. Okay, that's the basic idea. To be asleep, to be awake. Sleeping and waking. Paul uses this in a figurative sense and a spiritual sense. There's a play off of being asleep and being awake. Okay? Are you dead or alive? Physically, Are you dead or alive spiritually? Are you sleeping on the job spiritually? Are you dozing off spiritually? Or are you wide awake? Are you alert? Or are you neglectful? Are you sharp or are you sloppy? Okay, you could see kind of the idea here. Okay, so what I did is I color-coded it to try to bring out the nuance of how he uses it. We must not sleep like the rest, but we must stay awake and be serious, verse 6. Okay, he's not really talking about being unconscious in the evening, okay? Not that kind of sleep. Okay. And it looks like in verse 10, he's talking about whether we're dead or alive. Yes?
Did ordinary people in those days, did they write like this?
That's what Greek letters look like. Mm-hmm.
That would take a long time, seem like, to write like that.
The alphabet that we know kind of has its roots going into Greek. And then some of those roots go into Hebrew in the way we form our letters. For example, that A, our A, and the Greek A, there's a lot of similarity. The K, the kappa, a lot of similarity. That third one, not a lot of similarity. That's a theta. If you were in a social club and you're I don't know, what social club were you in, but yeah, I don't know, something theta, then you would know that, okay? Otherwise, you wouldn't know that. I think there are people who do math and they use Greek terms and Greek letters in hard math. I wouldn't know because they put letters in math and I never recovered, much less Greek letters. But there's Greek letters that show up in some of those hard maths, okay? I think the theta may be one of those. That's a TH in English. It's a combination. It's a diphthongs, two sounds, a T and an H. Kathu, E, and then the U, and that squirrely one is a D. What looks like a W, that's a long O. That's the omega. So when you talk about alpha and omega, that's the first letter of the Greek alphabet and the last letter of the Greek alphabet. The last letter of the English alphabet is Z. The last letter of the Greek alphabet is omega. It's a big O. And you can see that one kind of looks like two O's put together, which may be kind of part of it. O, it's long O. Okay, and then that looks like an M with one long leg is an M with one long leg. And then the E, and it looks like a V, but it's really an N sound. Looks like an English V. Kathudomen. So yeah, that's the Greek letters. Okay.
I feel sorry for children.
Yeah, they have, but Dr. Clay goes, oh, the little Hebrew boys and girls, they can do that. You can do that. We're like, oh, I guess they do.
Japanese is worse.
Oh my God.
Well, I should give you the Hebrew alphabet because there is no portability from English into Hebrew or Japanese or Chinese because the hooks, I mean, we can hook an English A on that second letter and make it a little bit easier. In other alphabetic languages, in other languages, the alphabet is not quite so familiar. Okay? So there's a bit of a word play. There's a bit of a nuance here in 1 Thessalonians 5. Thought that you might want to see that. Okay? The issue to raise is we want to think about words, but we also want to think about the usage of the words in a context. Yes, sir.
Of all the versions of the Bible, do you have a favorite?
Do I have a favorite? My favorite happens to be kind of the one I use most often at the moment. So at present, I think this Pew Bible is really helpful. I still kind of gravitate back to this because they try to translate terms consistently and maintain the same translation for the same. In other words, you wouldn't necessarily know from some English versions where there's a different Greek word under it, except here they try to maintain that consistency. I used King James until I went to college in Bible classes at the school I went to. That's just the Bible I had. I read it. That's one I memorized from. It takes some getting used to if you're not familiar with it. But for those of us who are familiar, I think it's beautiful. It's also kind of tricky and hard if you're not. Well, we'll stop there. Hope that's helpful.